The morning I discovered my bakery had been cleaned out, I stood in the empty kitchen trying to process what was missing. Industrial mixers, specialty ovens, even the hand-carved rolling pins my grandmother had given me, all gone. But worse than the stolen equipment was the missing recipe book, 3 generations of family secrets bound in weathered leather. My name is Sophie Chen, and at 32, I was watching my husband dismantle my life's work piece by piece. Looking for something. James's voice echoed through the empty space. He leaned against the doorframe, twirling my grandmother's recipe book in his hands. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this? He smiled, the same charming smile that had won me over 5 years ago. Business, darling. Your little bakery was doing so well, I figured why not expand. Of course there can only be one premium bakery in this neighborhood. I should have seen this coming. The late-night phone calls, the mysterious meetings, the way he'd suddenly taken interest in the bakery's operations after years of dismissing it as my cute little hobby. But I'd been too trusting, too focused on building my dream to notice him dismantling it. Those recipes have been in my family for generations, I said, watching him flip through the pages carelessly. They're not just recipes, they're my heritage. James laughed, the sound bouncing off the empty walls. Heritage doesn't pay the bills, Sophie, but these recipes, they're going to make me a fortune. James' Artisan Bakery opens next week, right across the street. My eyes darted to the window, where I could see the storefront being renovated. The sign was already up, gold letters proclaiming his name above what used to be an old bookstore. You're using my family's recipes to compete against me? Compete. He shook his head like I was being naive. There won't be any competition. I've taken everything, your equipment, your suppliers, even your head baker Mike. Face it, Sophie, you're done. What James didn't know was that I'd been expecting something like this. Not this exactly. I trusted him too much to imagine he'd go this far. But I'd learned from my grandmother never to keep all your secrets in one place. The recipe book he held so triumphantly, it wasn't the only one. If that's how you want to play this, I said quietly, then I wish you luck with the bakery. He blinked, clearly thrown by my calm response. That's it? No crying? No begging me to reconsider. Would it make a difference if I did? No, he admitted, tucking the book under his arm. This is business, Sophie. You're just not cut out for it. As he turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. Oh, and I've already filed for divorce. The papers should arrive this afternoon. Don't worry, I'm letting you keep this space, though I'm not sure what you'll do with an empty bakery. I waited until his footsteps faded before pulling out my phone. The first call was to my grandmother in Taiwan. Ah, ma, I said in Mandarin, it's happened. Just like you warned me it might. My grandmother's voice was strong despite her 90 years. He took the fake book. Yes. Everything else too. The equipment, the staff, even our supplier contracts. She laughed, a sound that always reminded me of wind chimes. Good. Let him have the simple recipes. The real ones are safer with us. I smiled, remembering the day she taught me about protecting family secrets. The recipe book James had stolen contained good recipes, the basic ones we use for everyday items. But the real treasures, the recipes that had made our family famous in Taiwan before the war forced them to flee, those were passed down differently. Are you ready? Amma asked. Once you start this path, there's no going back. I looked around my empty bakery, thinking about James's smug smile, his certainty that he'd destroyed me. I'm ready. Good. Check your email. I sent you the first set of real recipes. The ones your grandfather used to build our first bakery in Taiwan. The ones that brought lines around the block every morning. My phone pinged with the incoming email. What about the others? One set at a time, she said firmly. First, you prove you can master these. Then we'll talk about the rest. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and clicked on the email. The recipes were written in traditional Chinese characters, each one accompanied by detailed notes about technique, timing, and the subtle variations that made them special. The first one was for our family's signature egg custard tarts, not the simplified version in James's stolen book, but the real recipe that had made my great-grandfather's bakery famous in Taipei. I touched the screen gently, tracing the characters with my finger. James thought he had taken everything, but he didn't understand what really made a bakery successful. It wasn't just equipment or staff or even recipes written on paper. It was the knowledge passed down through generations, the techniques that couldn't be stolen, the secrets that lived in the hands and hearts of those who had earned them. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike, my former head baker. "Sophie, I'm sorry. James offered double my salary. I have kids to think about." I understood. James had money, family money he'd never earned but wielded like a weapon. He could offer higher salaries, better benefits, fancier equipment. What he couldn't buy was the soul of what made our baking special. The divorce papers arrived as promised that afternoon. James had been thorough. He wanted a clean break, offering me a settlement that looked generous on paper but was a fraction of what the bakery had been worth. I signed them without argument. Let him think he'd won. That evening, I went to the local restaurant supply store. The owner, Mr. Wong, had known my grandmother when she first came to America. "I heard what happened," he said as I walked in. "That husband of yours, taking everything." I nodded, pulling out a list. "I need to start over. Not everything at once, but the basics." He studied my list, then looked at me over his reading glasses. "Your grandmother called. Said to give you whatever you need, no rush on payment." "Mr. Wong," I couldn't. He held up his hand. "Your grandmother gave my parents a loan when they first came to America. Said it was repayment for kindness shown to her family in Taiwan. Now it's my turn to help. Take what you need. Pay when you can." By midnight, my kitchen had a new mixer, a second-hand but reliable oven, and basic supplies. Not the top-of-the-line equipment James had stolen, but enough to start. I worked through the night, following my grandmother's detailed instructions for the egg custard tarts. The first batch wasn't perfect. These recipes required a level of precision I was still learning. But by sunrise, I had something close to what I remembered from my childhood visits to Taiwan. James's bakery was opening in a week. He had my equipment, my staff, and a book of simplified recipes he thought would bring him success. What he didn't have was what really mattered: the knowledge passed down through generations, the techniques that made ordinary ingredients extraordinary, and most importantly, the determination that came from having to fight for everything you had. Let him think he'd won. Let him open his fancy bakery with his stolen equipment and basic recipes. I had something better. I had my grandmother's wisdom, my family's real secrets, and a plan that would take more than fancy equipment to beat. The morning James's bakery opened, I watched from my empty storefront as crowds gathered across the street. He'd marketed aggressively, positioning himself as the neighborhood's new premium bakery destination. The line stretched around the block, full of people eager to try what he promised would be traditional recipes with a modern twist. I spent that day in my kitchen, perfecting my grandmother's egg custard tarts. By evening, the basic recipe had evolved into something extraordinary: delicate pastry that shattered like glass, custard that melted on the tongue. Not just good, but memorable. "These are perfect," Mr. Wong said, tasting one. He'd stopped by with another delivery of supplies. "Just like I remember from your grandmother's bakery in Taiwan." "Almost," I corrected. "I'm still learning." The next few weeks were a blur of practice and preparation. While James's bakery bustled with activity, I worked in silence, mastering one recipe at a time. My grandmother sent them gradually, each one accompanied by long phone calls where she shared the subtle details that made them special. A month after James's opening, I got my first glimpse of trouble in his paradise. Mike, my former head baker, was arguing with him outside the shop. "These aren't working," Mike insisted, waving a stack of papers, my old recipes. "The measurements are right, but something's missing. Customers are complaining." James' response was lost in the morning traffic, but his frustrated gesture said enough. The recipes weren't producing the results he'd expected. That's when I made my first move. I boxed up a dozen perfectly crafted egg custard tarts and walked them to Mrs. Lee's tea shop 2 blocks away. She'd been a regular customer before James gutted my bakery. "Sophie," she exclaimed, hugging me. "We've missed you. That new place, it's not the same. Would you be interested in selling these?" I asked, opening the box. "Exclusive to your tea shop." She took one bite and her eyes widened. These are even better than before." "How much?" "Let's start small, 1 dozen each morning. We can adjust based on demand." Word spread quickly. Soon people were lining up at Mrs. Lee's before she opened, hoping to get one of my tarts before they sold out. I added a second tea shop, then a third, each with its own exclusive item from my grandmother's real recipes. 6 months later, James's initial buzz had faded. I watched his customer base dwindle as people realized his baked goods, while adequate, weren't special. The traditional recipes he'd stolen were proving mediocre in execution. That's when my grandmother sent the second set of recipes, the ones for our family's legendary moon cakes. "The timing is perfect," she said during our nightly call. "Mid-Autumn Festival is coming. These were your great-grandfather's pride." I spent weeks practicing, learning the intricate techniques that made these mooncakes different from any others. The delicate balance of flavors, the precise ratio of ingredients, the way the crust achieved that perfect golden sheen. When Mid-Autumn Festival arrived, I had partnerships with every Chinese tea shop and restaurant in the city. My mooncakes, each one crafted by hand following centuries-old techniques, became the talk of the community. James noticed. How could he not? His bakery, which had started so promisingly, was struggling to maintain steady business. The recipes he'd stolen weren't drawing crowds like they used to. One evening, he showed up at my door, still wearing his chef's coat. "How are you doing this?" he demanded. "I have your recipes, I have better equipment, I have everything that made your bakery successful." I wiped flour from my hands, taking in his frustrated expression. "Do you? Or do you just have papers with ingredients and measurements? The recipes aren't working quite like you expected, are they?" I smiled. Turns out baking isn't just about following instructions. It's about knowledge passed down through generations, techniques that can't be stolen. His face reddened. "You changed the recipes before I took them. That's it, isn't it?" "No, James. I just never showed you the real ones. The ones you stole. They're good recipes. Basic, serviceable, but not special." "This isn't over," he snapped, turning to leave. "Actually, it is. Check your sales figures. Check your reviews. People want something authentic, not just expensive equipment and fancy marketing." Over the next year, I expanded slowly but steadily. Each new recipe my grandmother shared became a signature item at a different location. No big storefronts, no flashy advertising, just carefully chosen partnerships with businesses that understood the value of quality. James tried everything to compete. He hired new bakers, while even more expensive equipment, ran promotional campaigns. But he couldn't replicate what made my baking special, the generations of knowledge behind each recipe. 18 months after he'd gutted my bakery, James's business was failing. I heard through the grapevine that he was trying to sell, but no one wanted to buy a struggling bakery with mediocre reviews. That's when my grandmother announced she was coming to visit. "It's time," she said. "You're ready for the last set of recipes, the most special ones." She arrived with a small, weathered notebook, the real family recipe book passed down through generations. Inside were the recipes that had made our family's original bakery in Taiwan legendary. "Your great-grandfather started with nothing," she told me as we sat in my kitchen. "Just knowledge and determination. Sometimes losing everything is the best way to build something stronger." We spent 2 weeks together, her teaching me the final techniques, sharing stories of our family's history. Each recipe came with a lesson, a piece of wisdom earned through generations of persistence. The day she left, she hugged me tightly. "You've built something beautiful, Sophie. Not just a business, but a legacy." A month later, I received an unexpected email from James's lawyer. He wanted to sell me his bakery. Equipment, space, everything had a fraction of what it was worth. His business was failing, and he needed out. I thought about it, remembering the day he'd stood in my empty kitchen, so smug with his stolen recipes. Now here he was, trying to sell me back what he'd taken. My response was simple. "No, thank you. I've built something better." And I had. My partnerships had grown into a network of specialty locations across the city, each one featuring unique items made from my family's real recipes. People traveled from other states to try my mooncakes during Mid-Autumn Festival. Food magazines wrote articles about the mysterious baker whose traditional pastries were redefining the artisan bakery scene. James's bakery closed 6 months later. I watched them remove his sign, remembering his words about there only being room for one premium bakery in the neighborhood. He'd been right about that part. The day they cleared out his space, I stood in my kitchen, now fully equipped with tools I bought myself, and prepared a batch of egg custard tarts. As the familiar scents filled the air, I thought about everything that had happened. James had taken my equipment, my staff, and a book of recipes he thought would guarantee his success. But he never understood what really mattered: The knowledge passed down through generations, the techniques that couldn't be stolen, and the strength that comes from having to rebuild from nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. Ready for the next chapter? I smiled, looking at the lines of people waiting outside my partner locations across the city, each one eager to taste something authentic, something special, something built on generations of family tradition. Ready, I replied, because sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of building something extraordinary. James had tried to destroy my dream, but instead he forced me to build an empire. One recipe, one lesson, one carefully chosen partnership at a time. And that was a success no one could steal.